We're back. This is Renovate and Build with Jim and Sandra, powered by Fairtrade Works.
I'm off to the subway. I must not be late. I'm going to work in tall buildings.
And we are going to be talking about tall buildings. We're laughing at that song by John Hartford this morning. I had to pick that out. Not a lot of songs about very tall buildings.
Good morning and welcome to Renovate and Build. Please join me in welcoming to the show Peter Hildebrand, partner of the Airedale Group Architecture. Peter is on the phone this morning to discuss the Exchange office tower located on the corner of Howe and Pender.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Let's start by telling everyone why this $200 million tower is getting so much attention.
Well, it's probably because it's doing the first of many things. It's actually going to be the first Heritage LEED Platinum designation in the country. It's going to be the first LEED Platinum tower as well, office tower that is. And as opposed to simply, I guess, renovating the facade of the existing old stock exchange building, we're actually keeping the entire building intact and going up and through the existing building with the new tower. It just only adds to the complexity of the process.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's not an easy way to do a building, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Peter, I got to ask you this question. The website uses the tagline "Swiss style on the West Coast, the pinstripe principle." Can you explain this to us?
Certainly. We're working in association with Harry Guger Studio out of Basel, Switzerland, and so the principle behind that is pinstripes are typically used to accentuate the slenderness of the form.
Okay.
Often we see that in the fashion industry. So that sort of principle was applied here as well to sort of help, I guess, thin out the building. At 30 stories, I mean, that's a high building, but it's not really all that high when you think of skyscrapers around the world. Right. We are limited by our view corridors here in Vancouver. So to accentuate the verticality of it, the pinstripe principle is used. And it also translates into the sort of the passive cooling technology that we've used here, in that we've extended the mullions sort of 18 inches off the face of the glazing to act as a bit of a solar shade, simply because the building is oriented sort of more on a 45-degree angle to the due south, which actually enables those to perform that passive cooling function because our city grid is not due north.
Very interesting. Peter, what would you say was the biggest challenge when you were designing this building?
Well, the challenge is a limited site. There's not much room to maneuver, and the economics of it dictate a certain floor plate size, in order to be viable in the office market. So you're dealing with a fairly large floor plate on a limited site and a limited height. Putting all those things together, and then of course having to respect the existing building that's there, having to incorporate all of the leading sustainable technologies and principles, and making all that, wrapping that all up in an elegant envelope. There's an awful lot to consider and to work out, and so it's an awful lot of balls that need to be juggled at once.
Well, that's what I noticed when I was reading about this and wanted to contact you for the show, was you're mixing old and new, and that's got to be a huge challenge. It
is, of course. Old is always a surprise, right? You begin to open up walls and things, and things are never as they appear. So you're sort of, in many ways, you're problem solving along the way as well. And so while you try to anticipate as much as you can, you always have to deal with what you uncover on site. And so it's fun, but it's also very challenging at times.
I bet. What are you most proud of with this project?
I think just the way it's all come together, and I think the way it's sort of elegantly understated against the rich texture of the old building. I think also in the way that the sort of forward thinking of our clients, and sort of looking at the future and realizing that energy costs aren't always going to be what they are. I mean, we enjoy relatively low energy costs here on the West Coast, and of course our clients coming from sort of a European mentality, they pay much more for fuel, they pay much more for energy, and so and they're also long-term holders. Like they don't just flip and sell. So they're looking at the long-term costs of ownership, and in their eyes that means building something very sustainable that is very energy efficient and is very forward-thinking in that regard.
It's fantastic. What will the Exchange office tower do for the Canadian skyscraper standards?
Well, I think it sort of sets a benchmark, especially considering it's, I think, the first tower going with completely triple glazing in the office market.
Can you explain that, Peter, just for those of us who don't know anything about the triple glazing?
Okay, well, typical homes in Vancouver have 2 panes of glass with an air cavity in between. Triple glazing is simply another layer of glass separated by a thermal spacer. So you've actually got 3 planes of glass, and of course that increases the energy efficiency of the building substantially. I mean, it also costs more, but in the long run, you're saving on energy costs. And so, I mean, our tower will be performing 50% better than any other tower on the energy consumption. And simply a big part of that is the glazing, the passive cooling, and then within the glass we even have frit patterns of ceramic coating that further enhances, the envelope's performance. And so what we've done is there's a graduated frit pattern that starts from the floor and goes up and dissipates to nothing at 3 feet, and then again at 3 feet above the ceiling, it starts again going up, intensifying to the ceiling level. So it acts and helps in the shading process. So, and it also acts as it's a really nice aesthetic function. On the north side, where we're dealing with privacy issues towards neighboring towers, we've used the same frit pattern, but it's been staggered on the different planes of glass to act as a privacy screen when viewed straight on, but when viewed obliquely, you can actually see right through it. So we're using the same sort of approach, but on different fronts and in different ways, and the same pattern intensifies as it makes its way around, depending on the solar orientation. Obviously, due south, the frit patterns would be much more intense, and then they would dissipate as they make their way around the building towards the east and the west and north sides.
Do you already see other developers in other parts of the country now coming to see your standards and what you've done?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely interest in a building that's going this way, and so whether or not others follow suit remains to be seen. I think it will also be, as a building goes up and begins to perform, I think people will take a great deal of interest in seeing, how this building actually does perform. Does it meet, all the goals that we had targeted? And if it is, if it has a substantial savings in operating costs and so forth, I think, owners would only be interested in that. I mean, that's the way it's going. It's going to come to that anyway down the road. It's just a question of, how soon do you get on board?
Yeah.
Right. And who wanted to make the initial investment?
Well, it's the clients who are driving that. Mm-hmm. It's definitely driven by the clients.
Interesting. So when can we look forward to seeing this finished product, and who's going to be in the building?
Who's going to be in the building?
Yes. Do you know the tenants, any of the tenants yet?
No, I'm not. I know they're in the works of dealing with some major tenants at the moment.
Fantastic.
Simply because I know we've been doing marketing material for it. But general construction is looking at about 3 years, so they've been working on it now for about 5 or 6 months. And of course, here in Vancouver, we put all our parking below grade, so they're going to go down for a year and come back up. So they're excavating, and then they're going to be building the parking levels back up to ground zero, and then by the spring, hopefully, we should be up out of the ground and then heading upwards. So hopefully in about 3 years.
Wow. It must be hard to follow up with a project like this, Peter. After you've completed such a kind of a forward project, what's next for you? Anything interesting or kind of groundbreaking on the horizon?
Well, we're always, our practice is actually very diverse. We don't necessarily specialize in office towers. And so it's, we work on everything from custom homes to, towers and shopping centers and things like that. So, and in terms of the environmental front, we're always looking at, projects that are forward-thinking in that regards too. Even when you look at, the new concept of passive house, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but really low energy buildings where you're relying essentially on the occupants and the equipment to heat the building.
Right.
We're looking at that in schools and buildings in more remote locations. So that's something that we're very interested in following up on. And also we deal with some developments where they're basically off-grid. So that's one of our partners is very much interested in that sort of thing, and it keeps things interesting and just a wide variety of stuff. It's challenging at times, but it makes life worth it, right? It makes it interesting to come to work.
Exactly. I bet it does. And now you're going down in history with this project as well, so it's kudos to you.
Well, thank you very much. And we've also benefited from working with Harry Guger Studio in Basel, and it's been great. So.
Well, I hope you're going to join us when this is complete. We'd love to have an update.
Certainly.
Right. We've been speaking with Peter Hildebrand, partner at Iredale Group Architecture. You can find out more about the Exchange at their website. It's theexchangebuilding.ca.
And we'd like to thank you very much for listening. Next week on Renovate and Build, we'll be speaking about the revised building code that has been pushed back until January 1st. Global Mail reporter Kerry Gold, who has been following the new code and the ramifications very closely.
And Megan Gary will be here with another edition of Product Face Off. We hope you'll join us then.
Stay tuned on CI 650. Tom Lucas and Sherry Brown will be here with Radio Real Estate. Have a great weekend, and thanks for listening.
Introducing a revolutionary new construction system. This is Renovate and Build with Jim and Sandra.